advocate by their side, and to help them understand the process and what was going to happen and make sure that the paperwork was all ready to go. And so it is such a valuable and important work that you're doing, and it's really meaningful. I had a question about the 233. Are all of those Bountiful residents?
Yes.
And I'm just curious, how many hours are you contracted for with Bountiful City a week?
29.
29. Do you feel like are you able to serve all of the people who come in the door? As far as just the workload, are you, I don't know, do you feel like you're able to get to everybody, or we have a backlog? What does that kind of look like?
I do make it a great effort to reach victims. There are times when there are weeks that are much more stressful than others, depending on, like last week, for instance, there were trials. And being there at the trials and then not being able to focus as intently on reaching the victims for today's calendar, and so there are times when it is a challenge I'll leave early on Thursdays most of the time because I'm up. My 29 hours are over, and I have gone over a couple of times, but it was necessary. I feel that my priority is to reach each victim and to let them know of the services that we have that are offered to them, and to see what their needs are. And so, there's a lot of grant work to be done. There's quarterly reports and those things, but the victim always comes first and takes precedence. And so that's important to me. But some weeks it is more difficult or more challenging, like I said, to reach everyone. But I hope that there's not a victim that I've left in the wind, because I like to be very thorough in the cases that are upcoming, and make sure that they know that we're here. So, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure I speak for all of us when I echo what these council members have said. Thank you so much. It's so reassuring to know that our victims have someone like you to help them through the process. So were there more things that did you get through your presentation?
I did. I was told I had about 5 minutes.
Yep.
So
No, that's great.
so
I just want to make sure that you
overview of what I do, but I'm happy to answer any other questions. Since I've been working since the end of December, I did note that there are, as far as victims I've personally helped being in this position, there's been 92 victims, and I have offered 511 services for those 92 victims.
I just have one more follow-up question. How are individuals referred to you? Is it through the police department, or is there a direct way someone could contact you? How is that mostly, how are things funneled to you primarily?
When the police are on scene and they are assessing the situation, and that with the victim, they perform lethality assessment protocol. It's a lap form that they fill out for the victims. If it rates high, that's all in the police report. But mainly, I go to the UT Court's website. I pull down the calendar, the upcoming misdemeanor calendar, or like on Thursdays, the court clerk usually sends that finalized calendar, and I go off of that. And then, like I said, Lana, the legal secretary, she will, after cases have been screened by Mr. Nielsen, she'll let me know which cases have victims in it that I can reach out to. So I'm reaching them a little sooner than just when the calendar comes out. And then also, police will, I've had some officers, be in an interview with the victim and come and get me. And I was able to help them and walk them through a protective order, so at the office. But other than that, they give them my information on scene, and it's just, me being proactive mainly.
So you're not really seeing very many people call directly and self-refer necessarily? I mean, unless
Not
they're kind of
many.
going through like a domestic violence call or,
So I have had a handful of victims call me who were referred by another victim advocate in Davis County, and because they were a Bountiful City resident, they referred them to me. That's one thing. It would be to let the community know that I'm here and that they can reach out to me and just ask any question, anything that I can help them with, but to at least let them know that there's a victim advocate for Bountiful City. So it's still, I'm still fairly new. It's been, like I said, been 5 months. So initially it was me learning the job on my own, and there's been some great resources that I've had, but that's one thing I would like to see. It would be nice for the community to really to know that Bountiful City has a victim advocate, and we're here to support them, and so.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great for our residents to know that you're there as a resource, and we're so grateful that you are. You seem perfect for the job. So I'm sure that, yeah, it's just so helpful for them to feel like there's someone that they can go to. So thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I would like to say, if I may, it is a joy for me to serve. In our victim advocate meetings, we had someone address the question of how much do you share with the victim about your personal experience, and basically, because that's been asked, well, do you even know what I'm going through? And one of the things one of the comments that was made was that every victim advocate has been touched by domestic violence, and so we get it. Mm-hmm. And so it's quite an honor and humbling to be able to be where I'm at in life now, to be able to extend a hand to help others. So
that's wonderful. And yeah, for them to feel like there is someone who's relatable, mm-hmm. What a difference that can make. So thank you. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your work.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, well, we understand if you need to leave as we discuss other things, but thank you so much for being here tonight. So, thank you. Okay, we will turn the time over to you, Francisco, to help us look at the next steps in our general plan discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There it is. Following the same trend as before, I don't have a separate presentation. This is just what I have on the screen. It's exactly what's been published on our packet so far. So we were here a month ago reviewing the moderate income housing, water element. That's what we did last. And we wrapped that up, and we're having these series of work sessions with council to make sure that everyone's on the same page regarding the general plan update that we're currently working on. And on the schedule that we've had, it is this time's turn to talk about transportation and traffic circulation element as required in the general plan. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that as far as the staff report. So I want to show you the element that's been drafted and edited drafted by Logan Simpson Design and edited by staff. I'm just going to move on, and I should probably blow it up a little bit more so we can see it. I have bad eyes. As indicated, this element, this drafted element, and it is a draft, is found on page 5 of our packets, and it starts with a quick introduction regarding having a well-planned city. I don't want to bore you. I don't want to read it word for word. I can at your request, but I'm just going to highlight every section if you don't mind. The second section talks about the state requirement. There are 4 required components of a general plan as indicated by state code. Reminding the council that general plans have been and are still, they're an advisory document. Again, just a refresher, these are the goals and policies that will drive the future implementation, i.e. the zoning code for the future, as well as other city policies for development and growth throughout the city. The third section simply talks about context, talks about our freeway access and the coordination that we have from Wasatch Front Regional Council, which we're a member of, regarding what they do, WFRC, what they do. They put all of our plans and they put them all together in one big monster document. That's what the WFRC 2019-2050 Regional Transportation Plan is about, as they coordinate items both with UDOT and also with UTA. We do talk about how that plan mentions the future BRT, that's the bus rapid transit. And I'll get to the South Davis County Active Transportation Plan in just a little bit. Moving on, on the fourth section, we simply identify the connectivity that we have, which is pretty much very well connected, as you can see on this map over here on the right. Even though it's for a different purpose, you can see a little bit of that grid system going on, anything south, not south, but east of Orchard Drive. It deals with our topography and our terrain as we encounter the foothills, and then we tend to be a little bit less connected, as we go up east. I think I said west, but I meant, or I said east, but I meant west. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you why Bountiful Boulevard doesn't appear on that, what is that, figure 2, as one of our kind of connectivity streets? And
Yeah, this map was created by the active transportation plan, and why Davis doesn't.
That was my next question. Why Davis? Why not Davis? Why Bountiful Boulevard?
I don't have that answer. I can try to find an answer, or we could add it on there.
It's just they're very important.
We have a
streets.
missing.
Yeah, so it just seems like odd that they're not there as part of our grid system.
I could try to guess why why they didn't include it, but I'd rather not.
Okay.
So that I can put that on my to-do list, Council, if that's important to find out the why. Moving on, the next one talks about public transportation. We are now serviced by line 455 and 470. 455, Weber State to the University of Utah. 470, downtown Ogden, down to downtown Salt Lake City. And then we have our micro transit, our UTA on demand. We no longer have the east-west connections that we had early in the morning and late in the afternoon. We've been part of that model for probably a good 2 years now, maybe 3, for that on-demand UTA that gives you, you pay for it the same way that you would do a bus pass or a ride, and then that also includes another transfer by using the bus or UTA facilities to your destination. We do talk about a little, we have a great explanation on what bus rapid transit is. That will help the reader understand what that is. I know that you're all there, but this will also help the Bountiful resident understand what might be coming, what is coming our way. And a way of reminder is once the BRT is up and running, which is from the University of Utah down up to Station Park Farmington. It's supposed to replace both the 455 and the 470. And we've had those two main bus lines for a long time. We move on to talk about our bicycle network, or lack thereof. We have a bike lane striped now through the efforts that our engineering department had to fund some grants that we received to take care of Bountiful Boulevard. And then there's a tiny network there. The 100 West has a painted bike lane on both sides from 400 North to 500 South.
Francisco, I noticed in that section, it talks about the painted bike lane on Davis, but it doesn't actually mention the painted lines we've added on
Right.
Bountiful Boulevard.
Right, this map was created before we got the grant and before we executed that money.
Okay.
And so that would be the second, would be let's give ourselves credit for what we have. And we'll add that on Bountiful Boulevard. The Davis one, and I said 2, I meant 3. The Davis Boulevard bike lane does have a break right in the middle, and it doesn't continue to go through.
So, just as we're talking about bicycle network, is this document, would you say that, because it just basically tells us what we have, and like you said, or the lack thereof, what we don't have, that bicycling, bicyclists don't really have a lot of great options in our city. But is this something that we want to flesh out a little bit to talk a little bit more aspirational about what we hope to see with bicycle network in our city? Or while we're in this paragraph, what's your opinion?
I don't think it would be it might be a better idea to put that on the goals and actions.
Okay.
We have recognized for years that it's easier, still challenging, but it's easier to add bike lanes on north-south directions, but it's somewhat more challenging going east-west based on our terrain and topography. Just on who would be able to use such bike lanes. And we do understand that e-bikes sell regular bikes on a 701. We received that stat long time ago. However, we also have to account for the weather and who's really using that bike lane in the middle of February. So we got to put our resources in that. It takes some funding and resources to accommodate these types of facilities, and I think that's why we have the few bike lanes are all on north-south direction. So I have a little bit more information than you do, and that I've been able to see the goals that were proposed by the consultant from all the meetings that they've had with not just the steering committee, but also with the personal interviews they had with you, the Planning Commission, many others, as well as surveying our residents. And they did not have a specific project through the Logan Simpson design efforts for this is the priority. It's more in lines of general concepts and ideas of try to accommodate a bike lane everywhere that we can. It's more of a general statement. And obviously, it's easier, or low-hanging fruit is to try to accommodate these on our rights-of-way where we have the room, where we have the capacity, but we can't forget that we need funding for these as well. So I think, to answer your question, Mayor, I think it would be better appropriate to put those specific goals in the goals and action section, which was always intended for us to come back towards the end of this process through the work session with you. But we could follow your lead and direction.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It seems like a lot of what we're looking at in the staff report is primarily what Logan Simpson drafted on this element, correct?
Yes.
So, if I am not mistaken, actually an active transportation plan was an additional goal that we added when we were considering what our goals and objectives were going to be, not just the state-required goals. We had economic development and active transportation. And it seems like a lot of what Logan Simpson refers to in their report is a 2019 active transportation plan, which, thank you for providing that. And what they rely on is a 2017 American Community Survey, 2012 Utah Travel Study, and a 2017 National Household Travel Study. It seems like without additional survey data included from the process that we went through all last summer and into the fall from Logan Simpson, I am concerned that maybe we are not up to date with what Logan Simpson provided, which is what we're looking at on pages 5 through, 11 in the report. And kind of like Councilmember Bradshaw pointed out, there are some things missing, and just going through, I wasn't able to go through all 120 pages, but I got a big bite out of this, and I can finish it tonight. But one thing I did see in the active transportation plan of 2019, there are specific prioritized goals. They did a really in-depth job, and they go into talking about how they selected the stakeholders, how the process happened, the meetings that took place, pop-ups, curettes. I didn't even know what that was till reading the report, which is a special kind of little stakeholder group of experts and elected and administrative officials and staff. And there are a number of things that are outlined in the active transportation plan that are prioritized, that are called out as priority. And with that, kind of going and looking at the active transportation plan, seeing the things that in 2019 were prioritized, I would love to see like a breakdown or a report, even if it's like a 1 or 2 pager with bullet points with information that we got from our, what was the group, Jess? The steering committee, yeah. Finding kind of the recommendations from our steering committee that put in so many hours, what we're, I'm sure we've disaggregated all of that information from surveys and our pop-ups, finding out what the priorities were in those and survey responses. Because this, I'm just a little concerned that we're relying on some outdated information when we're doing this visioning, and or if we're not, I'd just love to see what that is. It would help us. And I mean, I guess just finally, I don't know if the mayor was suggesting this or not, or if it was a question, but I do feel like active transportation, as we discussed it before we even started the entire process with Logan Simpson over a year ago, active transportation was a distinct goal area that we were going to cover. It wasn't just going to be tucked in to the transportation plan. So that is kind of what I'm concerned about. And when, sorry, I'm just going to kind of say another thing. On page 3 of the staff report, it says the city should spend efforts reviewing active transportation as the city experiences redevelopment opportunities. it was my impression that we were going to do more planning and visioning and implementing around this component, and not just reviewing and then kind of, implementing it where and if we can. But it was going to be a more intentional part of this process.
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure, absolutely.
And then I know Councilman Bell had a question as well.
Sure. The first thing is that you are correct in that we call those 6 themes or guiding principles is what we called them, which one, the one related to transportation, it was rewarded as a connected community with complete networks for pedestrians, bicycles, transit, and vehicles. So you are completely correct in that that is one of our guiding principles. Decisions were made early in the process in that based on the maturity of our city and our built-out status, we don't have any plans to say, build a new road that goes through somebody's property. We don't have any of such plans based on the current capacity that we have throughout the city. So this early decision that I'm speaking to, was a decision to incorporate all things transportation in this one element. We didn't feel that we needed to have a separate element for active transportation based on where we're at as a city. And that was done with the consensus of the steering committee. I'd have to go back and take a look at notes if we ever brought that before the Planning Commission, City Council joint sessions. But I hope that you understand why we made this determination in having all things transportation being in one component or one element and not 2 separate elements. Speaking about...
Can I just respond to that? So just looking at page 8 that you just referenced, where it says a connected community, you just referred to the guiding principles and the description. But that doesn't say what our elements are. Moderate income housing, the land use, water, transportation, and then we could add additional elements, which I truly believe we said would be active transportation as a separately considered issue, and economic development. And those aren't really called out on page 8. So
That's how I remember it. I remember that we were saying that we would discuss active transportation as a part of the whole transportation, but certainly dig into active transportation.
And I would just also like to, again, reference the 2019 Wasatch Front Regional Council Active Transportation Plan. Sorry, I have got this really, I've tabbed the heck out of this. But this is an amazing document. And like I said, it's a little bit outdated, but on page 45, there are some recommended facility types, and 34 total miles are just paint that don't require infrastructure, changes to infrastructure, changes to roads, and they are called out in bike lanes, neighborhood byways, and improved street crossings. And in total, that is the majority of the recommendations of the WFRC are changes that really, truly just require paint. And so
Do you just want reassurance that we are going to get into the meat of this active?
Yeah, because what I'm concerned about is when we hear that we're going to we don't have the money for this, or I don't know, or the bandwidth to do this. The WFRC has laid out a lot of ways that we can do it, and they even give 2019 estimates of what the paint would cost. There are also grant opportunities for paint. And I think really there are only like 10, 11 more miles. So out of like 45 miles, 34 miles are just paint, things that could happen with paint.
So Francisco, what did you envision with the process in terms of us getting into the details of this WFRC?
Yeah, because a lot of this work has already been performed, and Councilmember Price Hewish is correct in that the plan further towards the end of it does outline 3 priority projects all within Bountiful. What we envision, and it goes back to the former comment that Councilmember had regarding the updated data, in that, yeah, there's probably a more updated American Community Survey that's going to come back and is going to show very similar numbers. And the priorities, as reflected on the active transportation plan, it's not necessarily going to change based on what that paint is required to build these facilities. The difficulty is finding the resources to have this paint, in that we need to maintain it every 2 years, we need to repaint it, we need to actively work on this, and it's something that the city hasn't allocated for in the past.
Well, I would like to suggest that it's something that we could discuss as a council about the allocation of such paint, the allocation, the prioritization of doing, because when we talk about there being low-hanging fruit, paint is a low-hanging fruit. And the number one thing that is cited in the WFRC Active Transportation Plan of 2019 is Orchard Boulevard. It is cited most prominently as the highest priority among stakeholder groups, among the curettes, among pop-up community groups. And looking at the maps, they talk about walk sheds, bike sheds, and one of the areas that is considered for paint, just a paint project, it doesn't require any, the suggested mode of improving Orchard and making it more walkable, more bikeable, more safe, more accessible, more connected is the paint, not infrastructure. And looking at the map, in the city of Bountiful alone, we have 7 schools within 5 blocks of Orchard. And 6 of those are within 2 blocks of Orchard, 3 on the east side, 4 on the west side. And that provides even more compelling information to continue to prioritize this, looking at what was decided by community, public, stakeholders, experts. And if we don't think that things are going to change very much from 2019, I would argue that even more people are even more inclined towards active transportation now, 5 years later, post-pandemic. And I don't feel comfortable moving forward on this element without information from our steering committee, from the other information that was gathered, and also going back and clarifying whether this was a separate and distinct element that would be considered and not just tucked in kind of vague language, because I think it's worth a discussion to see, is this something we prioritize as a council?
Thank you. I think that is worth the discussion. Councilman Bell had been waiting, and then I know also Councilwoman Bradshaw has a question.
Well, my question is related to what Councilmember Price Hewish was mentioning, but it was a kind of an open question to our city engineer. In that, what's your opinion of the infrastructure and modifications that would be needed to our city streets to accommodate bike lanes? And I know it varies by location and by street, but we've simplified it to paint. I wanted to just better understand from your perspective, working with our streets every day, what you might add to that for our understanding and decision-making.
Sorry for the pregnant pause. We certainly have the ability to plan and implement projects, whether they involve simple modifications to striping schemes or whether it's physical improvements. I'm just going to give you my honest opinion. The barrier to that lies in accommodating that in our bandwidth. And can we do it? Absolutely. We have to find a place to tuck these in between the big maintenance projects that we have to get done and the other priority projects that arise. If the council determines that, these are high priority projects, then we can prioritize them. But there will have to be some decisions made that at what expense. You've heard the phrase, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. And I'll be very frank with you. We have been living at the edge of our bandwidth over the last few years with trails and other big projects.
Fiber, yeah.
And so forgive me for being frank, if these are high priorities, then we may have some tough decisions to make. Or we need to decide, are there other resources that need to be brought online?
That's helpful, thank you. What was your question, Councilwoman Bradshaw?
Thanks. It's related to the transportation plan, but I kind of wanted to take it even a step further into the history and just understand how we are to interpret the document that was created for the three cities. So it's labeled as a draft, which means I'm guessing we have never formally adopted it. This would be the first time we've adopted it. Gary's nodding. Okay, so that helps me with part of the question. Have the other two cities formally adopted this into their general plans?
They have one caveat, 85%, I'm guessing here, 85% of all the improvements are within Bountiful City.
I did notice in reading it that it was very Bountiful heavy.
Extremely Bountiful heavy.
And then my next question is our consultant's recommendation and staff's recommendation that we incorporate the 2019 draft entirely? That we modify the 2019 draft? Or are we incorporating it like by reference? So that's
That's a great question. Staff does not recommend that we adopt it as is. It was intended as
A reference manual.
a reference manual or as ideas. It hasn't been vetted nearly closely enough by the council or staff to say we think we ought to do this. It's ideas without a price tag. There are estimates given, but those estimates don't live in reality. And that's why we don't recommend adopting it as part of our master plan. Just to remind ourselves of the conversation we had about the general plan back at the retreat in January, the idea of the general plan was to be guiding principles, not a to-do list, not an implementation plan. The trails document that you have there is sort of an implementation plan. So what we've been trying to do is pull out of that document and put into the general plan the guiding principles that would guide future decision-making. Where we get into a higher level, or I guess a more granular level of implementation, is the goals and strategies that you haven't seen yet, right? That we have not discussed as a group yet. Those would also be adopted as part of the general plan. But again, those are also going to be largely guiding principles, not a list of projects. The project phase comes after adoption of the general plan, and we know what your priorities and principles are, and then we can have this conversation about resources compared to other projects. So I understand what Councilwoman Cecily Price-Hewish wants is a detailed implementation plan, but that's not what the general plan is, which is why it's not at that level of detail.
Could I just respond to that? I'm not wanting a detailed implementation plan, but when we talk about the guiding principles and the things that we decided would be elements of the general plan, active transportation was one of the things that we determined would be one of 6 things.
So I'm going to interrupt you if I may, because we heard that and we've understood it. I'm not sure that there was consensus that it needed to be a separate element. There was consensus that it needed to be included in the general plan, but that's very easily changed right now. We've drafted it as it being part and parcel with the transportation plan, but I guess the question for the council is, do you want us to draft a completely separate? We can do that if the majority of you want us to do that. That's easily solved.
Could I also respond again to that? Just,
So the way that I interpreted our direction was that we were going to talk about active transportation. I think it was very clear, we all agreed that we wanted to talk about it as part of the transportation, element, but that I'm unclear about how deep that dive is. And I think that it's really important to a lot of people on this council. And so I definitely, I just don't know where that discussion takes place or when. I feel like there are things that we'll talk about when we talk about the implementation, but then there are also things that we want to get into right now. Like, we have this document in front of us, and there's a lot of good stuff in there, and I'm sure that a lot of us do want to dive into that. And so, council, staff, if you have recommendations about how we are able to address, this document, I'd love to hear it.
Can I?
Yeah,
I want to
please.
finish up on my questions. 'Cause
Yes.
I plowed through the draft active transportation plan this weekend and enjoyed parts of it. I did note that I thought the prices made me sad, because we'll never see those prices that were listed for projects and paint and things like that, because they're pre-pandemic prices. And then, in reading what was drafted in our packet, they're very different levels of meatiness. And I was having a hard time reconciling how I was to use the draft plan, the draft 3-city plan versus the documents in here. And so I'm still kind of unsure, and I know we're running out of time in our work session, so I would love some, feedback from the staff because we'll clearly have to discuss this at a future meeting. What should my homework be? Should I be spending more time thinking about the big active transportation 3-city plan? Should I be focused on what was provided in the packet? Where should I be placing my time and thoughts?
You should have 3 principles in mind as you do that. The first one, you haven't seen the goals and actions just yet, so placeholder for one of them. The secondary, the direction that we took was to have the South Davis Active Transportation Plan be a guide for future projects that we could pick from in that. And you'll see how that will tie once we have the goals and policies. In that, a lot of this information is simply there to give us an idea of possible price costs and whatnot. So it would be that placeholder. Wait to see the goals and policies, and regarding the plan itself, we can change the South Davis. We can change whatever we need to change from that point on. With a caveat, it was intended to be a guide. I thought personally it was too specific, in that had we adopted it in 2019, great. By the time we get to some of those projects, it would be 20 years later. So the price tags wouldn't apply at that point. Again, it was simply meant to be an idea. And by tying it together and adopting a plan of how it's drafted, I believe that it makes us eligible to apply for those granting opportunities based on whatever bandwidth we're able to have within the city for future projects.
That makes sense. Thanks. Councilman Bell.
I'd like to just quickly iterate something that's important to me when looking at the active transportation plan or transportation in general. That I think the active transportation plan generally did. I understand that most of it was in Bountiful, but it was working with our neighboring cities so that we didn't have a dead-end goal when it got to our city boundary and it didn't carry through. So I think when we're looking at this, it's really important to me that both engineering and planning with the other cities are together with us and that we're working in concert together. And, sorry, one more thing. Thinking of doing an active transportation plan as a council and going through and deciding what's important worries me in that we're now designing by committee. And that's like trying to make a painting that's unified and beautiful, but everybody's doing their own little piece without working with the other kind of. And I think it's really important. That's the nice thing about a draft document. If we can adopt it together, it's usually unified within itself. But
So that's a good perspective. And knowing that, when you look at this draft document, are there things that you think that we as a council should, change about it, or?
no, I'm not ready to
I
start
mean,
pulling
yeah,
in.
obviously today we're not
Yeah.
doing that, but I'm just wondering about next steps, Gary.
So maybe to answer, I think, both questions, kind of where we go from here, this is what I would suggest is take a look at what's in the, I'm trying to think of
Active transportation plan.
the active transportation plan that was presented by the consultants.
Oh, not this one,
That's what I'm talking about.
this one.
What's the name of that, Francisco?
The active transportation plan.
Okay, the draft active transportation plan. Take a look at that and tell us if you think there are more of those principles that need to be included in the general plan element on transportation. That would be step one. So which elements maybe are not represented well enough? Again, thinking of principles, not projects, right? I think we all agree on that. And then the second that we would like to know come next meeting is, do you want us to separate them and make active transportation its own element or not? I think that would be the homework.
I appreciate that. I also would just echo what Councilmember Bell said. There are multiple places in the active transportation plan where they talk about broader overreaching policy principles, and the ideal in a place like this three-city kind of network that we have, where we have roads that start in North Salt Lake, go through Bountiful, and go through Centerville, the need for having, this is something to think about, and it's in the document, the collaborative principle and policy of working with the other cities, because we share these roads and there are opportunities. And again, that's something that is laid out so many times, as there are incredible opportunities for Bountiful and Centerville and North Salt Lake to work together for granting and funding opportunities if we, adopt guiding principles around active transportation specifically to move forward. So that,
Thank
I will
you.
not say anything else.
Well, thank you. So council, do you feel like you know what the next steps are? Okay. Got your homework. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Appreciate your help, staff, helping us walk through this. And we'll just take a brief, 2-minute break, and then we'll start with our regular council meeting.